ready to play. They'll be ready to play, but it'll be with heavy hearts, and it'll be with heavy hearts probably for a while. But as far as wearing the manager hat, I'm just wearing a hat right now. I'm just wearing an angel hat.
One more. Let's take one more. You good? Thank you, guys. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And a very emotional update there from the Angels organization there, as they are still very upset dealing with the loss of Tyler Skaggs just at the young age of 27 there. You can see the rest of the ball players there taking it very hard, but the game will go on tonight, and no doubt that they will be playing with some heavy hearts. Our thoughts go out to Tyler and his family during this very difficult time. We will now be switching on over to a public safety meeting at Phoenix City Hall. Let's listen into this.
Our weapons. A perfect example of that will be when we're conducting building searches, we draw our weapons when we conduct building searches. If someone is in the field of the gun being pointed, we will need to document that, so that's a good example. It was heard loudly and clearly 2 weeks ago, especially at Pilgrim Rest Baptist Church, that we need to figure out a way to streamline the process for releasing reports. We gathered all the individuals who have some kind of stake in the report writing process and dissemination of those reports this past week, and we figured out a way to make sure that if an individual is involved in a police incident, that next of kin notification will make sure that next of kin gets a complimentary copy of that police report within 30 days. Our recruiting and hiring best practices, we've done an amazing job on the front end with recruitment and getting people into our process. We've done an amazing job with the hiring, we've done an amazing job with the training process. We have some of the best practices in training. What we need to do is really look at our hiring process and best practices. Metro PD and Baltimore have a couple of systems and a couple of ways to test for bias and or interaction with community members. So our hiring team is out looking at some of those, and they'll be making a couple road trips in order to make sure we have the best practices there. Last but not least is the early intervention system. There are some companies who provide this service, and we kind of have something that's kind of like an early intervention system, but the system is not able to talk between and among the various systems in the city. So what we want to do with this early intervention system is really find ways to track behavior and make sure that if red flags or yellow flags pop up on employees, that we're able to take action and help that employee through that crisis and or perhaps move them to a different function if necessary. The early intervention system was one of the components of the 21st century policing strategy and plan that came out a few years ago. And I quote, and I give you a quote from that report. It says, "Hurt people can hurt people." So the early intervention system will be the way for us to make sure we're really taking care of our employees and keeping track of what's going on with them before they engage with members of the public. Assessing best practices among peer agencies, you all know that we've been working through the National Police Foundation study that talks about recommendation number 9, and the mayor mentioned this previously also, looking at and making sure we're having the right people respond to calls at the right time. It doesn't necessarily have to be a police officer all the time. To whatever degree and extent we can have behavioral health, we want to work through that. So in our assessment of best practices among peer agencies, we're going to be looking at behavioral health, de-escalation techniques and tactics, recruiting, hiring, and training, report writing, community engagement. We're also going to look at, too, and I probably should go back, this came up in conversation, need to check our practices of how we deal with community members post-traumatic incident. So we want to make sure we have the best of the best in that, too. Obviously, in improving training, that's a big step and a big piece for us. I mentioned to you that we're doing a great job attracting people on the recruitment side. We have some of the world-class best practices in training. We have a different challenge with the field training officer process, and we need to do a deeper dive in that. The field training officer process, so everyone will know, police officers go to the academy, they get certified, they graduate. They go to a post-academy, and they spend time in the field, kind of like on-the-job training, learning how to be a police officer from someone who's certified to be a field training officer. What we're realizing is that that function right now is assigned in patrol. We're going to move that function to the training bureau so that there's consistency in the training process from the time that we hire you until the time that you're checked off and being a solo capable officer. We're also going to have Arizona State University and others help us with best practices in field training in order to be the best of the best that we can be in that. Our report writing process, it was made clear, very clear, 2 weeks ago, Tuesday, but we've heard this oftentimes also, so we need to look at best practices in report writing, and hopefully the body-worn camera system will help us make sure that what the officers are seeing and doing is being translated directly onto those police reports. Last but not least, we're missing a piece. We have our survey for community feedback, and I don't know where that went. Our survey for community feedback, we're talking about voice, we're talking about hearing from our community members. The CPTI made this recommendation for a community survey in recommendation 11. The National Police Foundation made that decision and made that call for us too. We would like to conduct a statistically valid survey to assess public perception. And then we also would like to conduct a statistically valid survey to listen to my employees, because I haven't done that since I've been here as a police chief. So fast forwarding to council action, if I may, Mayor and Council, we're asking that you provide authorization to conduct a procurement process for an early intervention system, as well as item 1B, authorize to create a qualified vendor list for public opinion research firms and services. So I know this has been a lot of information and I talk really fast. I will have a memo that I'll present to the city manager that can be disseminated, and all of the information that we're providing is going to be provided on both the city website as well as the police department website. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Chief. We appreciate you coming back to us quickly with solutions. Taking the time to listen to your employees as well as the community. I will next turn it over to our Public Safety Subcommittee Chairman, Michael Nowakowski, for a potential motion and comments. Councilman Nowakowski.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, as the Chair of Public Safety for the last 8 years, I really want to thank our Mayor for the last 3 months as Mayor. You really worked really hard making sure that this was an open and transparent process and fair to everyone, and listening to all sides. And I know that today's motion, it's just the beginning. It's the first step in the right direction. And I know that as the Chair of Public Safety, working along with the Mayor, we have meetings that we're going to be setting up during the summertime. She asked me to keep my calendar open during the summer, so my wife's not that happy, but we're going to make sure that we go in between vacation time. But that's how important this is for her. So, Mayor, first of all, before making the motion, for making this really an open process, listening to both sides and all sides, really. And with that, I'd like to make a motion to approve items number 1A and 1B.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. We have many cards from the community and many comments from council members. Council member Stark.
Thank you. I just wanted a clarification on item 1B. You said that this would be a public opinion, but not just from the public, but it would also be for the officers in conjunction with you, correct?
Mayor, Councilwoman Stark, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Guardado.
You spoke briefly about early intervention software, and I had a question. Can you just speak a little bit about further on how this program differs from current one utilized? I know you mentioned it a little bit by the police department. Just talk a little bit about what's the difference between what's already there and from what we're asking to be implemented.
So I would like to have Assistant Chief Mike Kurtenbach explain that, because he's my right arm and he knows that system well.
Mayor Gallego, Councilwoman Guardado. So the system we have right now is Early Identification and Intervention, EIIP. It's a threshold-based system that is set up based on the 12-month rolling period and thresholds that we decide. For example, 3 administrative inquiries in a 12-month period, 2 Professional Standards Bureau investigations in that period, 2 vehicle pursuits or collisions. That information then is reviewed by an EIIP coordinator, a single point of failure, who then makes a determination of whether or not that gets pushed out to the field. It is a very rudimentary system that I believe is flawed because of that single point of failure. What we are looking for is a more holistic system that can look at the whole officer, that not only look at those triggers, but is truly evidence-based. And Mayor, you said something early on that our lives are driven by data. This system would be truly data-driven, and that's what we are hoping to seek.
Thank you.
Thank you. And it's been important to see there have been a lot of advances in this type of system because there are many departments who face similar issues, and so we want the opportunity to have the best and latest technology. Vice Mayor.
Thank you. Is it fair to say we're taking what's always been called in police procedural shows and so forth, your file or your jacket, you're taking that and making it basically electronic in a more usable form than you have right now?
Vice Mayor, yes, that's definitely true to say. As Assistant Chief Kurtenbach mentioned, we have the system in place right now, but the systems aren't talking to one another, and there's one single point of contact. What we're looking at is a holistic system that's able to track training, accidents, discipline, you name it, and put it all in one place so we're able to help and assist our employees and make them better officers out there.
So there are systems you're already aware of, but you have to go through a process to let people bid and so forth. So you couldn't start using one today if you wanted to, because we have to go out and buy it. Is that a fair analysis?
I would love to say we can just drop and play one and make it work, but no, sir, we have to go through a process.
It's all right. But there are several different firms, I suppose, that make stuff like this. Is that right?
Yes.
But we're not really reinventing anything here. It's just the way you're storing the data and how efficiently you'll be able to use it. Is that a fair summary?
So I would say it's the next level or the next generation. I'll go back to what the mayor, vice mayor said, that just the fact that systems have gotten so much better in the ability to connect data and information and provide the flags and systems. And I think we're definitely due for that. And I think this is a great opportunity for us.
Do you have an expectation that officers that maybe who could have used more training, or however you want to put it, will now pop up in this system who weren't getting early intervention before? I mean, I assume that's the reason you're promoting this.
So that, Vice Mayor, that's one of the many reasons, to be able to catch and track behavior so that we're able to make conscious choices and decisions that will impact our employees as well as impact our public.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Garcia.
So I have some questions about that system. We got in 2017. What data do we have from it, and has it been a complete failure? Have you not been able to use it at all? Has anybody been?
Mayor Gallego, Councilmember Garcia, no, it has not been a complete failure, not at all. It's a very basic system. As I mentioned, there are thresholds that are set in the system, but I believe it's fallible because there is a single person, the IIP coordinator, who's responsible for seeing when officers meet that threshold. What we are seeking is something that is far more robust and data-driven, that, as Chief Williams mentioned, connects all of our systems in one place. So, for example, if I may expound upon that, training is critically important in our department, as the chief said. Right now, we keep our training records in one location. Our investigation records, internal investigations, professional standards is in one location. We have officer notes, we have division files, we have department files. We have all of this information spread throughout the organization. What we hope to seek in one solution is a true 360-degree view of our employees. So whether it be somebody potentially needing some assistance from our employee assistance unit, or our on-site psychological services provider, or recognizing that an employee is perhaps going down a bad path where behaviors could lead to something more egregious, if you will, we don't have the capability right now. So no, it's not a failure what we have. We're looking at something better that would better serve our officers and our community.
Has there been a situation where something's come up through that database and you've been able to stop something or address an issue? The current one?
Yes.
And is there any of that data that's available?
Councilmember, I'll have to follow up on what data is available in the system. Some of the information, certainly as it relates to officer wellness, would be protected, but in terms of accidents and the other behaviors that I alluded to, I'll follow up.
Okay, and I got some questions on 1B, so I don't know if you want to go through 1A.
I think, go ahead and go in. I was going to take the cards on 1A and then the cards on 1B, but I think if you want to just go straight into 1B,
I
that's
could
fine.
wait for 1B if that's fine.
Okay. Councilmember DeCiccio.
Oh, thank you, Mayor, and I'm fully supportive of moving forward with these two items. I think that more information is always better than less. Prevents the ability to make bad mistakes, and they're bad mistakes sometimes if you don't get all the information in. No different than getting information on and prejudging things that occur, even in the field, and that's what we did by prejudging what occurred in the field with some of these officers. So the more information we get out, one of the things I'd like to do, if at all possible too, is that, and I go back to the story of the shoplifting case, if the police department were able to get out a timeline a lot faster than what we did, it took, about a week and a half to get out there. In the sense it allowed the media, the public, to only see the last chapter of a book. Well, not even the last chapter, the last page of a book. And think that what occurred in that book, it was what occurred in that last page, when in fact there was a lot that headed up to and caused the last page of that book. So if we can also get the police department to put out a timeline immediately afterwards, and it's going to be hard to do, and I understand that, at least a general timeline that goes out that outlines it so that the media, the public, I mean, there's not a single person out there that saw that video that thought, well, that was good, but they didn't see the fact that the individual was shoplifting, that they basically, the police officers gave them orders, commands, they ran from the police. The second time that they ran was about a mile away. All these things were occurring that the public was not able to see, so others were able to define what occurred, when in fact that's not all that happened. There was a lot else that happened there. So I'd like to make sure that whatever we do, we also look at creating timelines for the police department to get information out in a faster way. The, where is this? For the early intervention system, if I remember correctly, because I've been around for a little while, we had something similar to this back in the late 2000s. This is before most of the people up here on the council were there. We had something similar, so if there was a shooting, or there was an occurrence that occurred, we were able to identify the gender, the race, everything else immediately, so we're able to track if there was something being done to individuals in an area that was unacceptable. I always liked that because it gave us the ability to track what was going on. My understanding is, well, in my understanding, I believe we ended that program. When did that all stop? Because that's some information that would have been helpful. Pardon me?
So that was called the PASS system, if my memory serves me correctly.
That's it. I couldn't remember.
And I'm not certain. I don't know if I was gone when we stopped using that, or
You were gone,
Okay.
for sure.
Yeah.
But go ahead. I'm sorry, Chief.
Mayor Gallego, Councilman DeCiccio, yes, the chief is correct. It was the Personnel Assessment System, or PASS. It was a very simple system in that there were green light, yellow light, red light thresholds, but it was tied to the old PACE system, which was phased out with our current records management system.
And that ended right around, what, about 5-7 years ago, approximately. I'm putting you on the spot. You don't need to answer that, but approximately.
Approximately.
So, I mean, had that been in place, I think that would have been able to help us today to be able to go out to the community and talk to them about that. I'd like to find out exactly why that was canceled. I understand the record management process and the new plan that was put in place, but why was that canceled? I mean, that was something I was always supportive of, to be able to at least get an idea of what's happening out in the field. And at the end of the day, it gave our department the ability to say, wait a second, this is not occurring. Because I do believe that there are a lot of narratives occurring, some of them extremely false, that our police officers are racist and they're all that stuff. This would be able to point out and say, wait a second, that is not occurring, or they could actually verify that it was, right, with individual officers. So at the end of the day, we really need to be able to provide more information. And my understanding, just looking into what we're looking to do, this early intervention system, is a lot more complicated and a lot more in-depth, which I like, personally, because it also goes to the officer and what he or she is going through. So I'm fully supportive of this, but remember, to the public, we had something similar to this that would have really helped us today that got cut out. We stopped doing that several years ago for a variety of reasons that I believe, but I'll let them come back and tell us why. So from that, I'm fully supportive moving forward, Mayor. On the ad hoc committee, I kind of forgot we were doing that. Thank you for pointing that out. I like the idea that each council member, because we are elected body, that because we are an elected individual, we represent a larger population, and that population has an ability to be able to go in there. And then with the opinion poll, again, I think this is going to make sure, I would really caution that we try not to politicize that in any way. I know Sam in my office is delivering that message, that we're looking for deep information. And there might very well be a divide, but how big is that divide? Is there a divide? And how big is that with the population? And I think we as a public need to have that information too. So I think that's it from my end of it. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilwoman Pastor?
Yes, I'm holding in my hand right now Personnel Support Services Operation Order 3.8 and Item 4, Early Identification and Intervention Program, EEIIP, and I believe that's what you were speaking about. And the language in here is very similar to the language that is in 1A that we'll be voting on. My question is, we purchased this, or we got this software in 2017, and we're 2019. I would like to know, first of all, what the cost was for this software.
Mayor, Councilwoman Pastor, my understanding is that this module, which is part of IA Pro, the cost is approximately $17,000 per year.
Okay. And this module was to capture the data, because I'm reading the same language, so it's supposed to have operated, the 2017 was supposed to operate capturing the comprehensive risk management software system for early intervention based on individuals' performances and other measurements.
Correct.
Okay. What I'm hearing is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I'm hearing we purchased the software of 2017. We purchased a software that we didn't realize talked to one another's systems. Then now we're being asked to modernize and purchase a new software to 2019, which now means we don't have any data, or what, I don't know if the 2017 system and the 2019 system is now going to merge and be compatible. And how do we know the 2019 system is going then to talk to our other system and get the data that we need? So I'm just curious.
So Mayor, Councilwoman Pastor, all great points. I will say that technology moves fast and furiously, and we have been able to speak with and talk to vendors that will actually be able to deliver on everything that we're talking about, as well as make sure we're incorporating all the different systems. I will say in 2017, we didn't know what we didn't know. So we've had a lot of challenges with our records management system. I know you know that. A lot of challenges with our eCRIS system, talking to the IA Pro system, talking to a lot of different systems. And there are companies out there that are going to be able to help us do just that. And these are technological challenges that have advanced over time.
Okay, so in hearing that, I am hoping, or actually I'm not hoping, I'm going to direct, since I need to direct from the council. I am going to direct that our IT management is part of this purchase and is able to demonstrate that it talks to the systems. And if not, then we're not purchasing the system. Or we're figuring out a way that our 2017 can talk to our systems, because there's brilliant technology people out there that can make these pieces, these systems, talk to one another and gather the data and be able to import it and export it and wherever we need to do it. But now I feel like we're now back at the same spot that we were in 2017, and we're not moving forward. We're spinning. So that's one of my directives for 1A.
Councilwoman Pastor has the floor. Please be respectful and listen to Councilwoman Pastor.
Thank you. So I'll wait for 1B.
Mayor, Councilman Pastor, just to note, our Chief Information Officer will be part of the procurement team. It will include police and our chief financial officer as well.
Thank you.
To your point, thank you.
And I've had the chance to talk with police superintendents and mayors in other communities, and
This isn't a bad system. It just isn't the best system that we could possibly have. The EIIP is a standalone system that doesn't talk to all of the other systems that I mentioned. So it's an add-on module versus a holistic, comprehensive, evidence-based system that would allow us to get that aforementioned 360-degree view of an officer throughout his or her career.
So, I guess, Mayor, I would say, so we had, I don't mean to criticize any one individual, but we had, I'm a technophobe. I'd be the last person to tell you what system you should be buying. I'm relying on expert opinion, right, to figure out, does this make sense? I don't remember the discussion particularly about this. It's now been several years since we probably purchased it. But it sounds like it's one company that had a subset product that doesn't talk to its other products. I mean, did anybody think, is that a fair assessment? And if so, why did we buy that product? I don't know enough about it. I mean, I guess for me, I don't know enough about this area of life to make an informed decision on my own. We're relying on people who theoretically are going to pick the best product. Now, I realize it's 2 years later. I made the same argument about the body cameras thing, frankly. I mean, 2 years ago, the camera 2 years ago and the system 2 years ago is not nearly as advanced as the one now. I'm a little, I mean, is that accurate what I said, though, that it's the same company, this is a subset product, and then one of their products doesn't talk to the other parts of their product? That doesn't make sense to me. I must be misinterpreting.
No, Mayor Gallego, Vice Mayor Waring, I don't think it's you that's misinterpreting. I'm not communicating this clearly, so I am also not the most technologically savvy person. So let me try.
I think that's another way of saying we're old.
Yes, sir. So let me try and frame it this way. EI Pro, IA Pro, these systems do what they were designed to do. A professional standards system that allows us to track internal investigations. What they don't do, and they were never designed to do, was tap in to training records, other employment records, sick leave usage, things that were alluded to earlier that are housed in ECRIS. So they were never designed to talk to those systems. So we're seeking a solution that will combine the information in all of those systems so we get a true view of the employee. So it wouldn't be accurate to say that what we have today, the EIIP, isn't doing what it was designed to do. It is a module of IA Pro. It's just limited in its capabilities. And also, as I said before, it's a threshold-based system. So we just set the thresholds, and I'm not trying to minimize this, but based on what we think is right. It's evidence-based. It doesn't account for other factors, such as what part of a community an officer works in, who he or she might have contact with within that community. What are some other things that we should take into account? Because not every officer has the same job in the 3,000 members of the organization. Hopefully that provides a bit more context.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, and I'll come back to that point in a second. I guess, so it sounds like, and I'm not saying everybody's perfect, everybody always makes perfect decisions at work, but it sounds like we knew what the product did, we just bought the wrong or an inadequate product for what we're trying to use it for now.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, I wouldn't agree with that. Okay. So again, we bought a system at the time that we wanted to have to track things that were available at the time and at the moment that we were aware of. Over the course of 2 years, and I'll go back to my conversation or discussion that I had with Councilwoman Pastor, so much has changed technologically for us to be able to know what's going on with our employees in ways that are light speed ahead of the system that we purchased. So our discussion in having this early intervention system is to add on that next piece or that next layer that's going to allow us to assess so much more about our employees versus a very limited scope.
And I guess just from our perspective, I don't want to pretend to speak for Councilman Pastor, some of the other comments that were made. You know, we're kind of buying a souped-up version of the same thing we bought 2 years ago, just 2 years later. Now, you're saying no, so maybe that's bad analogy.
So Vice Mayor, I'm not trying to disagree, but I will say this. We're buying a system that is going to be a more holistic view of our employees and how to track that behavior and manage and mitigate that behavior before bad things can happen.
Right. I'm not trying to be disagreeable. It's just we wanted to track behavior 2 years ago, too. So I don't know that the goal has necessarily changed. Maybe it's a broader goal, but we wanted to track employee behavior too. We didn't want officers who shouldn't be on the street to be on the street 2 years ago either. I don't know if the goals of the police department have changed all that much.
Yeah.
I would say to Chief Kurtenbach's point, every officer shouldn't be judged on the same scale either, given what they're doing. They talked about that. I think there was an article in the paper, I think it was about Mesa Police. I believe one officer had been involved in 5 shootings, but then what they had done for a job was go out and I think serve felony warrants and so forth. I mean, they were right in the middle of things every day, all day, dangerous job. That would be more surprising if you were doing something else and you were involved in these shootings than that. So it sounds like this system will distinguish in that. I guess I want to get back, though, to something I asked about earlier. So if I was a sergeant, how many officers do I supervise typically?
Vice Mayor, Vice Mayor, it just depends on what your work unit is. You could have 8, you could have 10, you could have 15. Some units right now have 20.
So it's kind of manageable. So a sergeant has 20 paper files for the officers they supervise right now? Or do they use this system that we have right now?
So Mayor,
both?
Vice Mayor, it really depends on who the supervisor is. I'm guessing most of the systems are trackable on an online system type format. But back to your previous question, the current system that we have is not as robust and not able to catch the things that we really know that we need to look at with our employees.
But I mean, if the officers, so if one of the 20 officers they're supervising had been involved in a shooting or a discipline or multiple disciplines, they wouldn't know that? I mean, a supervisor wouldn't know that? Or a supervisor would?
So Mayor, Vice Mayor, it all depends, again, on where the systems are, what the information is shared, what IAPRO, as Chief Kurtenbach mentioned, it said, IAPRO looks at the disciplinary side, it looks at the whole discipline piece. We have multiple systems that hold and house different systems, and that's why the early intervention system is critical for us.
So if I was a sergeant monitoring up to 20 people, I'd really have to go search. If I was like, should we keep putting this person out there? I don't know. You have to go search through multiple systems and potentially paper to sort of piece together the narrative to decide what you want to do. Is that
Sometimes that does happen, yes.
Okay. That's just a little, it's not even a criticism of you or Chief Kurtenbach, it's just that's a little surprising in this day and age. Yes. I guess a question for Ed. I mean, you manage about 11,000 employees who are not police officers, right? So, and maybe separate fire out, so another 1,500 or so. But for our other officers, or for our other employees, excuse me, what system do we use, and do we have the same problem there? Because I would think you'd call up a file, and there'd be the discipline record, and there'd be everything else you need, salary history, job history, right? I mean,
So with our basic non-sworn employees or civilian employees, we have, well, for all our employees, we have an ECRIS system or an enterprise-wide human resources system that keeps basic information. But, and Councilwoman Stark will remember this because she was a department director at one point, there are departmental files and there are central files that are not always harmonized together in that system. So there is not one comprehensive system in the city, but most civilian employees don't have jobs that are as complex as our police officers and have the same stakes involved, I guess, in their actions and behaviors.
So they wouldn't have, Mayor, probably as thick a file because they wouldn't have nearly as many public interactions and opportunities for something to go wrong.
Generally
right?
speaking,
I
no.
mean, most employees wouldn't. I wouldn't think. It kind of makes me wonder how you ever figure out who to promote. It seems like it would take forever to piece it all together. Okay, thank you. This has been enlightening for me. Yes, thank you.
Councilmember Garcia.
All right. How was the EIP, the 17 system procured? How did that go about?
And I will ask Denise, our Chief Procurement Officer, if she can join us as well in case there are additional questions about procurement.
I don't know that we know specifically with EIIP what that procurement process was, but we can certainly find that out.
What did we do, an RFQ, an RFP?
Again, I don't know that
It's
we know that right
2017,
here.
so it's pretty fresh.
We can easily find that out. I don't know that the four of us sitting up here know that specific detail right now.
Okay. And then the follow-up question on your idea on the length of the implementation of the new system. I know MCSO under court order has been going through a similar process, and they've had a lot of trouble getting it implemented. And so with the conversations you've had, how long do you think before this is implemented and effective from where you get the system?
Mayor, Councilman Garcia, that's a great question. So going through the procurement process, we've talked to a couple of different companies and systems, and they say that once we get the approval and authorization, it can take them anywhere from 3 to 8 or 9 months to get uploaded and ready to go.
Okay. I mean, it's unacceptable hearing what we've been going through. But what comes up with that is this conversation, and I hope the ad hoc committee can support in that, where I think the mistake in 17 was community involvement and oversight. And so I hope that with this new system, we're able to ad hoc committee or whatever we come up with to make sure that there's community oversight over it, because I think what we've seen is completely failed.
Councilmember DeCiccio.
Thank you, Mayor. There is a reason why I vote against some of these IT things, is because of the lack of compatibility in the future. So if you go through my record, you'll see that. But at the end of the day, we're talking about the RMS system, correct? I'd like to get a letter to the council, at least, describing the current status of the RMS system. The City of Phoenix, my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, but we spent about $30 million on a system that doesn't work. So is that correct or not? Did we spend $30 million on that?
So Mayor, Councilman DeCiccio, I would need to get the absolute dollar amount. I know we've been very challenged with that system.
Please, Mayor, we've got to get these people to stop doing this interrupting. We're having a conversation here that's civil. Really. I mean, seriously, you'll have your time, everyone will have their time.
Yeah, these are serious issues.
Yeah, so stop that. So, Mayor, okay, I mean, I'm serious, stop it. So, I feel like I'm talking to my kids. So, at the end of the day, the RMS system that we have, we spent approximately how much on that system?
Mayor, Councilman DeCiccio, I don't know the exact number, but it is multiple millions of dollars. We should distinguish, though, RMS, or Records Management System, is a different system than IA Pro or the Early Intervention System. That's about the records that the police are keeping with their interactions, as opposed to a personnel system. And this is what we're talking about with the earlier intervention is related to our personnel system, and MS is related to the daily work of the officer, the reports, and those sorts of things.
Agreed. But what I'm also bringing back home is that we've had major functional problems with that system. And that was about $30 million. I think we kind of wasted a lot of money on that. But outside of that, I think one of the things this opens up a bigger discussion too is not just with the RMS or anything else we're doing. You've got to look at compatibility. When hospitals and others in the private sector went through this whole system through the Obamacare years, it's amazing what really did come out of that is basically a centralized system. I had to go in for a medical procedure today, and without anesthesia, so I'm just letting people know. But at the end of the day, so I'm fine, I'm cognizant here. But the fact that, I mean, a simple thing is like they knew what medication I was taking the minute I walked in. They said, hey, you're no longer taking this. It was that instantaneous. Likewise, the system that we look at needs to be compatible not only with what we need today, but to Mr. Garcia's comments, like, you know, we didn't do that back then. Well, back then was a different time. You know, a lot of the things, and granted, there were individuals from, you know, from Phoenix that were complaining about it, but it wasn't at the level that it is today. So I'm going to give, you know, everyone a little credit on this thing. So as we move forward, you've got to be able to look at compatibility issues going forward. And not only with this, and I'll talk to Ed to this, but the compatibility that we have with this needs to take into account also that we have, excuse me, private information that is medically related that cannot be disclosed and will not be disclosed at any time. I want to make sure we are clear on that, because that is private information of an individual. Likewise, the compatibility of whatever program we're going to be looking at, whatever system, which I like the idea we're going. That doesn't mean I'm going to vote for it, because I'll do the same thing I did before. You know, I want to make sure it's the right one, but it's got to have the ability to not only plan for what you have today and the needs of today, but something that may be 2 to 3 years from now. And it's hard to tell with technology moving at this rapid pace today. I mean, if you haven't followed what's happening in technology, which my kids inform me on a regular basis what's happening, but until we know that, you know, what I want to make really clear is that whenever we do this step, we don't come back 5 years later and we put it on the record, this is the best that we could do today, okay? But that's on our end of it. On your end, you've got to make sure that it works. So the RMS system that we have in place today, I believe does not work, and that we wasted $30 million. I believe that. So that is a fundamental. But likewise, you have a responsibility on your side of the table there. You know, I'll make statements like this is the best we can do, but you've got a responsibility that that is workable, it's functional, and it's able to be adapting to new changes moving forward. If you don't do that, we're going to be in this mess again. I mean, literally. And the other thing I'd like to get, if I could, along with the RMS, I'd like to know in the last 5 years, how much has the city spent on all IT-related items? You know, how much money have we spent on IT? And how the lack of compatibility has been occurring throughout each of those systems. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilwoman Guardado and then Councilwoman Pastor.
So in terms of the oversight, right, like I understand, you know, that we're going to be able to track things a lot better. Like how many times a week or how many, you know, times a day maybe are we going to be checking the checking that the program is actually functioning the right way, and how is it, and who raises the red flags, and how is it that we can also get that information, right? Because being blindsided, I don't think it's fun, and I just think it's important for us to be able to understand, you know, where the oversight is at, and making sure that we also have people from the community that's part of the oversight that can help, you know, this process be a lot smoother, and making sure that we have different eyes and different people looking at the system as well.
So Mayor, Councilwoman Guardado, that goes back to Councilman Garcia's point of making sure we have community involvement. We would need to have community involvement in writing the policy. We would need to have community involvement as we discuss and talk about what we want to have in the system. We already have some checks and processes in place where sergeants, lieutenants, commanders are supposed to be periodically checking those, and we need to talk through this with the community to make sure that we're meeting what the expectations are from the community as we move forward.
Councilwoman Pastor.
So in listening to the dialogue of Councilman Waring and really trying to understand what a process is, a city has HR process and protocols. Am I correct?
That's correct.
For all city employees. And in having process and protocols, there are items that are on a checklist or that a supervisor or a manager oversees and looks at in a very holistic, well-being way as a manager, that's what we're required, to look at our team and see, are they performing? Where's their mental state? Are they following directions? How are they communicating with one another? How do they operate in a team? All these elements come in play in an HR performance. So I find it hard to believe when I'm hearing a dialogue going on and hearing, well, one may do it this way, but the other one may do it this way. We may take paperwork over here and use the system over here and do all these other things when there are protocols that are required by managers and supervisors to follow. And when they don't follow, we have a responsibility to make sure they are not, to tell and write a performance review saying they are not following these things. So where I find it hard is that we have provided for quite some time, as I have sat on this council for 5 years, tools and resources for early intervention. Yet, I feel that there's a lack of will to utilize these tools and resources and accountability for not using these resources and being transparent. So I don't want to move ahead on item 1A and purchase something that we are not going to use to the level that we need to use it and hold people accountable. So I struggle with this right now.
So Mayor, Councilwoman Pastor, I hear what you're saying. I am saying that the current system that we have is not able to do all the things that you are saying that we should do. Yes, we should hold our supervisors accountable. Yes, we should be accountable. Yes, we should be responsible. Yes, we should know what's going on with our employees. And our ask is to make sure that we have a system in place that's able to do that, ma'am.
No, I get that, Jerry. But we have been doing this for the last 5 years, and there are systems into play. They may not be as modernized as the system that you're asking for, but there are systems into play and protocols. So that's where I'm struggling, and I hear you. I hear you.
Vice Mayor Waring. Oh, I'm sorry, Chief Kurtenbach.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilman Pastor, I want to make sure we're talking about the same thing. So our supervisors do hold their employees accountable. What we are seeking is a system not when something bad has already happened and how we respond, but to identify those things before they occur. So I just want to be very clear that once we have an incident of misconduct, let's say, we document that incident, that sits in a database, we can reference that for comparable discipline, for meting out discipline. We do that. Our supervisors are responsible for completing monthly supervisory notes on their employees, which go into the monthly or to the yearly PMG. And going to the Vice Mayor's point earlier, which Chief Williams alluded to when we talk about the span of control for our supervisors, a sergeant, and I'll talk about sergeants with officers, should absolutely know what's going on with his or her employees. But with an agency of our size, employees have the right to transfer. Employees could transfer from a different shift to a different precinct to a different work unit. And right now, that information that doesn't rise to the level of misconduct sits on paper.
So I understand that. I completely understand that, and thanks for the clarity. My point is that we have an Operation Order 3.8 that this prevention and this intervention started in 2017. So my worry is all of that data we are not looking at and we are not using, and now we're asking for a modernized system to look at it in a holistic way when we purchased a product and it doesn't talk to the systems. That's where my frustration is.
And Mayor Gallego, Councilman Pastor, we are using the system that currently exists. It's just a limited system. So I don't want there to be any misconception that we spent money on a system and it's just sitting idly not being utilized. It's limited. To your point, we agree wholeheartedly. It doesn't talk to the other systems. That is an important flaw in what we have today, but it is being utilized.
Got it. Vice Mayor Waring.
So I appreciate where you guys are sitting. You're getting a lot of public pressure and so forth, and you want to comply with community and council requests, and you want to do the best job possible, and you want to make it as easy on the supervisors to gather the information that they need. So I appreciate the further explanation about the span of control. I'm still a little surprised that there isn't more of a coherent we're going to promote this person or we're not going to promote this person sort of system long before 2017. I just would have thought that's a thing, right? Watch police procedural shows and they talk about their jacket or their file or something. I just think somehow that's getting to the right person. Obviously, I clearly didn't ask the right questions in 7 years on this council of do we know who we're supposed to be promoting and so forth. I just assumed that was something that was addressed in the 80s or 90s once we transferred to computers. Part of my questions is just me getting my backup because I am outside my area of expertise to the extent I have one. I can learn a lot of things. As my 9-year-olds will tell you, they know way more about computers than I do. And that's not the embarrassing part. The embarrassing part is they knew more about my computers and my phone when they were 4. That was actually pretty humiliating. I know what I don't know, and this is one of the things I don't know. So when the department or Ed or whoever comes to me in 2017 and says we need this thing, now I vote no a lot. So some of you guys cheer when I actually vote yes, so that's very gratifying, but I do vote no. Part of it is, I get kind of an uneasy feeling about, some of this stuff because I don't know enough about it and I don't really even know who to ask. So I guess I'll put it this way. Is the same group or same individuals or individual who recommended the system in 2017 working on this project again? Because clearly we kind of picked the wrong thing. And I'm not blaming anybody individually, but I will say, try to see it from my perspective, it's a little frustrating. I'm driving while blind. You're giving me information. I'm like, yeah, they say they need this. I try to make an informed decision, but I don't really have the tools to go out on my own and figure out what would be the best system for the department. I'm not a police officer, I'm not a chief, I'm not really a supervisor of anybody. We have Ed to do that. I mean, when you go down the list, I don't really have a way to do that. It's not really a fair ask of us, so we have to trust. And I am not the most trusting person. So when, one of the local TV stations called me several times, I don't know why me, but they did. It was ABC 15, and good for them, because there were issues about RMS and the rollout and how long it took. So I would have to call Milton, and then Milton would get back to him and explain why it's not that big a deal and so forth. But that was a little frustrating because I don't know enough to answer the questions intelligently. Maybe I should. There was a recent article about a Silicon Valley congressman who was complaining that the other congressmen and women don't know anything about computers. Is that really that surprising? I mean, you can't be expert in everything. So I'm curious, like, what would give me confidence to vote for this today or to move forward with this today, where I kind of feel like I got, again, nobody's specific fault, but a little bit burned, just a couple years ago for a fairly high dollar item. Not fairly, a high dollar item. I mean, what's really changed?
So, Mayor, Vice Mayor, what we're talking about here is procuring a tool that allows us to bring data that exists together. The system that Chief Kurtenbach and Chief Williams described is, I guess, in a silo of internal affairs, internal investigations, right. That information. There's also information about employee wellness that's not in that because that's internal affairs, employee wellness. There's some training, for example. So what this is a tool that goes and gets information from all those systems and brings it to one place so somebody doesn't have to go to each place physically, which is a challenge when you're supervising that many people or people are moving around. So it's trying to use a different tool to get the information that we have and harmonize that information.
I mean, I think I understand what the goal is. I'm just afraid we're going to be here a year, 2 years from now, and the goal won't be achieved for some reason, or this wasn't the exact right item. And I understand your point about the supervisors, and I'm not busting on supervisors, but if you have to go to different places to find out about your employees, then that's what you have to do. I mean, at some point, you know, I'm sympathetic to a point, but, you know, if you have to go to a couple different places or make a couple calls to find out if somebody's been disciplined or something, then that's what you need to do. I mean, that's kind of a major thing of being a supervisor. If you don't want the responsibility, don't get promoted. But yes, it would be great to make it easier and have it all in one place. I'm just trying to ferret out, like, what's really changed. I think the goal is the same. Maybe it's a ramped up goal. Maybe the technology is better. It has been a couple of years. Now, I made the same point about the cameras a couple of years ago, so it's kind of funny being on the other end to hear, well, the technology's gotten a lot better. I made that point about the cameras. If you wait a couple of years, look at the phones. Look at how many more things and how much better and cheaper it is just a couple of years later. The product that used to be $1,000 is now $100. And then they quickly stop making them, and they go on to something even better still. That's happening in every area of technology, so that's not that much of a surprise. But you know, some of this technology stuff, the experiences we had, frankly, an experience that I've talked about with you, Ed, at the state that they voted on right before I got there, the thing was a disaster, and they thought it was going to be the be-all, end-all, you know, be-all, end-all. So I don't know what I'm going to do exactly with this, but I want to make sure we don't, you know, just waste money on something that's not going to accomplish the goal that I think we all want. It just, that makes me nervous.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. And to that point, this is what this item is asking is for us to conduct a process. We are not purchasing anything at this time. So we go through a process, we analyze the products that are out there and what the cost is and their effectiveness, and bring that information back to you before we would ask to enter into a contract to do that.
Right. But Mayor, I think my question, or at least one of my questions was, you know, is it the same crew running the search? And you're shaking your head, no, Chief. So it's going to be at least different. Maybe that's a question for Ed.
Yeah, the Information Technology Department will support that along with the procurement experts, but the experts in the need has to come from the police department, and those would be identified by Chief Williams and Chief Kurtenbach.
So Mayor, Vice Member, Mayor Waring, if I may, we're actually having different people step up in this process because we know that this new procurement can add on additional tools. So we have the folks in the Training Bureau, we have folks in IT, so this isn't just the Professional Standards Bureau looking at this. Again, I go back to my holistic approach comment. We have more people in the department that are going to feed into the system, plus add on the dynamic that Councilman Garcia brought in, having community members have a voice and a word in what type of things that they would like to see.
Are we going to ask the business community to potentially help? I mean, they might know of systems that are fantastic and might really work for us. I don't know, but I mean, is that something that could be done? That's what I'd like to see. The private sector, they got a lot of, you know, they can't afford to just spend $30 million on something that doesn't work. They've got out of business. So that is something that certainly I would encourage you to do. I'm not getting on our IT department, but I'm sure there are people, if you can call Bill Gates, not the one who used to work here, the one who didn't graduate from Harvard, the other one. If you could call him, then that's what you should do. I don't know if he'll take the call, but you know, if you could try to get somebody who's really just top notch and they're like, oh, maybe they'll invent something for you. I don't know. But I would certainly encourage you to think outside the box on this, because the way we've been doing it doesn't seem to have worked, which is how we come to be here in the first place in part. So thank you.
So,
Councilmember Garcia and then Councilmember Pastor.
So I think we should get the system, just like I thought we should get the cameras. But I think if we don't fundamentally change the way we look at policing and involve community and actually address this issue with the urgency that it needs, then these systems are for naught. And like we saw this 2017 system. And so I'm for the system. I think you should get the tools that you need. But I do, again, want to point out, if community is involved, both if it's possible in the procurement, if community could be involved early on, the earlier the better, and then hopefully once the ad hoc's on, we could follow through with the implementation.
Councilmember Pastor.
So are you asking, when you say community involvement, Are you asking for community involvement to be from the beginning, to look at the system, to look at if it's gathering the data that is needed, to look at a holistic intervention piece? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Okay. My understanding is, yes, we're going through this conduct procurement process. This is a beginning that we go through this process, and then you'll come back and you'll say, oh, these following companies do these following things, and I'm hoping that you test it out and test it with our system to see what really works with our system. And then it'll come back, or we'll go out for an RFP, and an RFP, we have these companies. So it is beginning a process. So I want to be clear about that. This is the beginning of a process to purchase another system. Okay. All right, thank you.
We will move to our citizen comments on this item. We will begin with Warren Stewart Jr., followed by Dr. Ann Hart. There are microphones on either end of the aisle. Thank you, Pastor.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. With the high amount of officers using deadly force against civilians and other instances of police misconduct, it has caused a growing amount of public uproar and has led to mistrust between citizens and police, leading to even further negative interactions. Procuring a holistic early warning and intervention system can work in predicting which police officers are at risk of engaging in negative interactions with community members, which we have seen too many instances in the African American community specifically. The Phoenix Police Department can provide targeted early interventions to prevent such interactions, rather than responsibly dealing with the officers after incidents occur. And in conclusion, many of our daily operating systems are constantly being upgraded on our phones, computers, social media, and other forms of technology to strengthen security measures which prevent viruses and threats. These upgrades and these systems that automatically happen on our phone and we just push a button allows our lives to function properly. So we must invest in an early intervention system that is modernized, highly functional, and accountable as other departments around the nation, because it will help prevent the viruses and the threats that are in our police department against the civilians who experience police brutality. We are asking for a system that works for us, the people, since the system of injustice is working against us. I would hope that you would seriously consider the best early intervention system that will help gain the security that we need and weed out the threats in our police department in the city of Phoenix. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Ann Hart will be followed by Toy Sanford.
I would like to say good afternoon to the mayor and the police chief, Chief Jerry Williams, and council persons. I'm glad to be a part today of this forum to hear your integrated dialogue on this topic. And it's very obvious that there are a lot of concerns and questions, and I'm glad to hear that being discussed to the forefront. But it sounds to me as though at the end of the day, we know there needs to be some additional oversight in this matter, so that, as one of your councilmen so clearly suggested in the beginning, so we can have both sides of the stories, because we know the truth is stranger than fiction. And I agree that we do need a holistic approach, and nothing is more surreal than to have the actual data. One thing that I would like to say is that we do have in this audience, later on you may be able to be identified with who those are, members of the Community Police Trust Initiative, who has been executed since 2015. And as a part of that Community Police and Trust Initiative, we sent several recommendations to the city manager, and one of those recommendations included exactly what we're expecting today. Now, it is true that through evolution, technology improves, and I would hope that we would all to agree, and I would like to render and encourage that we do consider that we do use this technology so we can evolve in this process. And as a part of that community initiative and trust committee, in May 2015, one of the things that was on our report was to build trust and legitimacy for continued policy oversight for technology, and that the public be engaged in this process to include a solicitation of feedback from the community, as it best has to do with training, crime reduction, and education and officer wellness and safety. So I encourage the implementation of this technology. Thank you.
Toy Sanford will be followed by Garrick McFadden.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, Chief Williams, Mr. Zerker, Chief Kurtenbach. My name is Toy Sanford. I am speaking to you as a representative of the community, but I'm also a doctoral candidate in psychology over at Grand Canyon University, and I say that because I have the research expertise now in behavioral science. The other reason I wanted to speak to you is because I am retired sergeant from the Phoenix Police Department, and I also had the opportunity to be one of the two people who actually created the initial early intervention program that got international recognition several years ago. My studies in psychology and my ongoing interest in early intervention has led me to creating my own consulting company, and I would love to be able to assist with some of your procurement processes if that be available. But one of the things that I do want to stress to you, and especially since looking at some of the history of early intervention programs and where they've come today, there seems to be a misconception in them being either a behavioral program or an auditing tool. And listening to the discussion here, it seems to be a little convoluted. So I would urge you to decide whether you want your early intervention to be an auditing tool, which is something like what I've heard MCSO doing, or if you want it to be a behavioral tool. And truth be told, it is not a personnel system where it is tracking a lot of the evaluations. It is supposed to be designed to draw inferences of problematic behaviors, like Chief Kurtenbach mentioned, before it becomes an issue to your constituents in the community. Unfortunately, there is a limitation in the type of software that is out there, and that's where I am planning on helping with addressing the research to support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Garrick will be followed by Michelle Rose.
City Council, Mayor, Chief of Police. I sat in this beautiful building reading on my phone the best studies by the University of Chicago about EIS systems. We know that we need a machine learning system. Is our current EIS system, is it a machine learning? Because we know that we can game the system if it is just a set of marks that are stated. Second, we know that it needs to go back farther than 1 year, because we know that the greatest predictor of police misconduct is officers that have been at a suicide, and especially if it's a child. But if it only goes back 1 year, the cumulative effect of being in those, taking on the trauma of those suicides will cause. We also know that the best effect of that police who have 4-year college degrees are 34% less likely to have misconduct than those are. So do we have a program to get our police who do not have college degrees the tools to receive a college degree to make us safer? There's so many questions. On this, I put myself as in favor of this, but the questions that have arose of what we have right now, this system is not machine learning. So therefore, it is not the best practice, and it can be beaten. Because if you know that police chases are one of the things that cause misconduct or gives you points, then our police might be less active. So a question that the council can ask is this machine learning, and do the officers know what type of information goes into the algorithm that is being used? Thank you for your time, my time.
Mayor,
Councilman Nowakowski.
is it machine learning, or what is it?
Well, I don't know that we would know what we don't have a solution.
So, Mayor, members of council, so that the answer to the question that the gentleman just mentioned, is it a machine running? We're letting you know that today we need more components to make the machine run and function the way it's supposed to function. And that's why we're asking for the different system.
But I think the woman that spoke just before brought up a valid point of what are we trying to gather? Because for me, early intervention is really early prevention and really the well-being of the police officer. And so what is the tool that we're looking for? And so I know you don't have the answer, but I think that's what the group and the process need to figure out, what is the best in order to have.
I think it was McFadden.
The will be more likely for a police officer to have a conduct of misconduct. What this machine learning does is it eliminates 32% of the false negatives while making sure that 12% has better outcomes. This puts our police, so police that might be put on the sideline, there's a less likely event of them being put on the sideline, while more effectively finding the police they're more likely to have. Like, as I said, the greatest indicator of police misconduct is a police officer who does a suicide, right? And the current system, with only being 1 year, does not track the cumulative effects of those suicides. So just from the start, if our interrogation, this is not a machine learning, and they will be back here in 2 years saying, we need a new system. So that is my question. Is it machine learning or not? Thank you.
Thank you. And today's vote is to authorize the department to go out and look for solutions. So we are not recommending any one solution today. So we can go out and look for the most advanced technology and take Councilmember Garcia's suggestion. We talked with the community, Vice Mayor Wang's suggestion. We talked with leaders in the business community and get whatever is the best practice. Anything you wanted to add on that? All right. Michelle Rose will be our next speaker, followed by Princess Lucas Wilson.
Hello, my name is Michelle Rose. I'm a resident of Scottsdale. I support the Early Intervention Software Initiative. My first recommendation would be for every future meeting with the community, and definitely anything involving technology, to bring some of your tech team here who can explain these things. So for this, we need to make sure that holistic data collection is maintained, recording excessive force complaints and the outcome of the investigations, any incidents of officers being on the Brady list, which in my opinion should be an immediate disqualifier. They shouldn't even be hired. Falsification of police records, such as they put one thing on the report and then a video comes out and they change the report. That should be an automatic disqualifier. obstruction of justice when they refuse to testify or not delivering police reports and videos, which would include refusal or just inability to wear body cameras turned on. Also, pre- and post-hiring history of like their personal history of domestic violence or any criminal history, as well as this new information from the Plainview Project, which involved Phoenix police officers celebrating police brutality. And this information should be owned by the public. It should be maintained and held by the Citizens Review Board, which we'll talk about later. And be sure that the CRB is an independent third body which maintains full control of the data warehouse. It should be elected officials which represent the community, that look like the community they represent. Thank you very much.
Jimmy Bethel, followed by Ken Baker. I'm sorry, Princess, and then Jimmy.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Chief Williams, and City Council members. Safe policing is essential to our well-being, and I'm here for the Maricopa County NAACP branch. Although perceptions and interpretations vary regarding police encounters, the NAACP Maricopa County branch acknowledges the persistent pain associated with the loss of loved ones and the related community concerns about safe policing, and acknowledge that these concerns may also have a racial historical context. Moving forward, it is crucial that we as a community and the Phoenix Police Department focus on solutions to these long-standing public law enforcement and community safety issues. We also acknowledge that African American community leaders and others have proposed solutions in the past, and we welcome other allies in this endeavor. It is particularly imperative at this juncture that we as a community go beyond recommendations to plan implementation with continued community input. We ask that the following be considered for implementation with the sense of urgency as expressed by community members. First, some of these have already been mentioned. Civilian Oversight Committee or Board to review police conduct and make recommendations for improvement. Next, early warning system to identify triggers, symptoms of possible mental health issues or unmanaged emotional distress experienced by police officers. As we believe these conditions have potential to jeopardize public safety, we recommend pulling effective officers offline before unprofessional conduct occurs. Next, although there have been opportunities for community feedback in which some voices were heard, a community survey is recommended, this has been recommended before, to further foster transparency. The survey would serve as an additional method for feedback to increase community voices regarding their respective safety concerns in policing. Next, conduct additional listening community meetings in small groups to facilitate more preventative interactions between the community and the Phoenix Police Department, and to also generate solutions.
Could you please give us your final thought?
This is my final thought.
Perfect timing.
It's coming up. Final thought, review recommendations made by the Community Engagement and Task Force approved by the Phoenix City Council on January 11th, 2011, that may still need implementation to garner community trust, and specifically review those recommendations related to improving the process for accountability. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Jimmy Bethel, followed by Ken Baker.
I'm Jimmy Bethel. Sorry.
happens all. I'm also a singer, so please excuse me. I met Chief Williams last year at Coffee with the Chief, I think it was, event. And I tried to explain to the Chief at the time, and I'm not playing a blame game, but people want to know how they can get home without getting shot by police officers, okay? That's the bottom line. People don't want to hear about statistics. If you want statistics, Stanford University did a 10-year study of over 1 million traffic stops just to tell us that black and brown people were discriminated against and were stopped more than any other race. Okay? I'm a retired police detective with 32 years of police and security experience. I love my cops. Nobody loves cops any more than I do, and I've been through it all with the police department, good and bad. But let me say this. I have spent the last 2.5 years developing a product that will absolutely identify safe hands on traffic stops. Police officers stop people at night and they don't know who they're approaching in a vehicle with darkly tinted windows. Police officers put their lives on the line. I'm not playing the blame game here again, but had the Chief listened to me, one officer might still be living, and at least I think the 2 officers that were killed on traffic stops, their families would have had financial assistance if the Chief had even helped in any way me putting safe hands in vehicles. What Safe Hands does, basically, is to identify yourself as not having a weapon when you're pulled over by a police officer. The main reason police officers shoot people is because they were lunging for something. All my years of experience, I'm in uniform with a gun on. Nobody's lunging for anything. I'm not saying that it doesn't happen, but one thing that the police department has to realize is that you have racist cops on the Phoenix Police Department. All police departments throughout the United States have racist police officers on it. Okay?
Thank you for your testimony. Ken Baker.
Let's promote.
Followed by Walter Nicholson.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you. Last time I spoke in front of the city for a contractual thing with the Bank One ballpark, or the America West Arena, I apologize. And the one thing is it was kind of political, and then there's contractual things. So it sounds like this item 1A is you're trying to find out if we want to start a process to start a purchase of another software product. And I'm a pragmatic guy, and I kind of would ask you, why can't you just improve what you have, or figure out and pay for an IT group to integrate all of the softwares that you have to accomplish what the chief wants to do? And then second, why can't the union and plea work together, because they're certifying people? Why can't they have a hand in how things are certified? And that's just a layman's personal, just looking and listening to you. And I'm impressed with the questions, because that's what I would ask. You know, we bought something in 2017. It's not like we bought it in 2000. So the goal, I think, is to make sure that things can be communicated with in an easier fashion. But I agree with one of the council persons to say, well, if you have to do a little more work to make it happen, that's what's going to happen. If you don't wish to do that, don't be a supervisor, don't be a sergeant, don't be able to sign off on your group. If you have too many people in your group that you can't certify everyone in the things, then we can reduce that. But there's operational things to do. Software will not, I'll conclude with this, software will not solve a human problem. And what this police department has and the city has is a human problem. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Walter Nicholson, followed by Redeem Robinson.
the Honorable Mayor, Police Chief, and members of the City Council. I'm not computer savvy. I'm just listening. Some things I understand what you're saying, some things I don't. I want you to know this, and I'm sure the American people would like to know. You said the police officers are going to get body cameras. What will be the consequences if they turn them off?
Fire.
What will be the consequences? I'm sure the American people would like to know that. And there ain't no question they can turn them off or turn them on at will. My primary question is two. What would be the consequences for the police officers that pulled guns on that family? Why would they be left on the police force to do the same things all over again? Well, I'm 75 years old. When I was a child growing up, the old people used to say, take a rotten apple out of the barrel. My next question. I was kidnapped, arrested, assaulted, and seriously injured. Why is it that I can't file charges against the people that did it? Why is that? I would really like to know, and I think the American people would like to know too, because if that happened to me, and it's okay for me to be assaulted, arrested, kidnapped and assaulted, and injured, not being a suspect of anything, not being accused of any crime, is that okay? The Constitution of the United States and our laws is important to me. I hear other people talk real good, but they don't do nothing to uphold the law. The laws are based on the Constitution of the United States. And whether anybody wants me to be an American or not, I am, and I'm proud to be. I feel like I and my neighbors, my brothers and sisters, deserve an answer to that. Did you notice I didn't paint anybody a color? Did you notice that?
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you for your time, and thank you. You know, like I said, because you locked me up and threw me away and put me in prison all my life, I'm not familiar with a lot of things that you guys are familiar with, so I just got to speak the truth, and I hope you can accept it.
Redeem Robinson, followed by J.J. Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council and Chief Jerry for calling this policy session here. I believe that we are moving in the right direction. It seems like we're moving in the right direction here. We seem like we have some solutions here. However, I'm a little concerned as a citizen, as a black man in this city here. We keep going through with these meetings and talk and town halls and talking about solutions. Can you assure us today that we're actually going to get some solutions today? Because I don't know about anybody else in this room, I'm a little frightened to live in this city right now. I just got to be honest. And I've lived in some of the worst cities in this country. I've lived in West Baltimore. And I fear Phoenix more than West Baltimore. Because our police department, it has a bad reputation right now. So I just want you all to assure us, okay. I just want you all to assure us that we're actually going to get some solutions today. Thank you.
Thank you. J.J. Johnson, followed by Vidi Hernandez.
Mayor, council, I've been coming before this council since at least 2012 talking about officer accountability. And basically nothing has been accomplished at this point. We have seen a police officer killed, probably by his peers, because he came forward to report misconduct. That was Sergeant Sean Drenth. We, over and over again, it's like Groundhog Day. Every time we come back and talk about this, it's like y'all have never heard about this before. And the way the system is set up, when an officer engages in gross misconduct, and I'm going to use the name of Justin LeClaire. Justin LeClaire was arrested for sexual misconduct with a minor, and when he was arrested, he resigned, and y'all didn't do an administrative investigation after that. So we never got to the bottom of what was missed. In his case, what was missed was writing 500 DUIs over a 4-year period. He was a regular 700 patrol officer. He wrote 500 DUIs to fluff up his overtime because he was supporting 2 families. And y'all missed it. I've talked to council members, I've talked to police chiefs about this. When an officer like Tim Morris raped a woman while he was on duty in one of our patrol Tahoes, he resigned and there was no administrative investigation. Nobody looked at how there was a vacuum of accountability with his supervisors. Nobody looked at where did his squad mates think he was with that woman that he was raping in the back of the Tahoe? Where did the dispatchers think he was with that woman? That she was arrested by Scottsdale PD, and then he just dropped her off at home after he raped her. So nothing has changed in that system as far as how he could pick her up from Scottsdale and just drop her off at home after he sexually assaulted her. If an officer goes dark for 41 minutes like we had here, he's probably in trouble. The things that kill police officers break down into 3 things: felonious action, accidents, and cardiovascular accidents, cheeseburgers. Those are the things that kill police officers. If an officer goes dark for 41 minutes, he's probably in trouble. But we haven't fixed the system. Fix the system. I'm tired of coming here talking about this.
Thank you. Bidi Hernandez, followed by Xenia Aronia.
Who's that?
Bidi Hernandez, followed by Xenia.
Thank you so much. All right, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to give this statement in Spanish because I know there's Spanish-speaking families that are here. Voy a dar este mensaje para las familias que están aquí y saber qué está pasando, un poco lo que está pasando, ¿verdad? Familias no han tenido justicia día tras día tras día, de que esto está pasando por años, ha estado pasando la violencia de los oficiales a las personas y a las familias y no hay justicia para estas familias. Los policías tienen derechos, pero los derechos de las familias se ignoran completamente. También hay un sindicato que hoy pidió que mucha gente viniera a esta junta a apoyar a los oficiales. Este sindicato, esta unión de policías, es una unión de las más racistas de los Estados Unidos. Es una unión que apoyó la SB 1070, que estuvo con la Jan Brewer, ahí, ¿verdad? Cuando estaba firmando esta ley racista, la más racista de los Estados Unidos. Apoyaron a Arpaio cada elección. Y más reciente, en los últimos 2 años, apoyaron a Trump, diciendo que ellos van a hacer, ¿verdad? Y acá están, que van a enforzar las leyes de migración de Trump. Por eso estamos aquí también, ¿verdad? Porque este sindicato y la representación de los oficiales es racista y es violenta, y ellos son los que tienen y paran que los oficiales malos sean corridos del departamento. So, quería decir que ellos son responsables, muy responsables de la violencia que también existe aquí. And just in summary, 15 seconds, just pushing back on all of the conversation, we want this to move forward. This is great, but we have also seen the lack of accountability at every single step of the processes. There are rights for officers, but there's absolutely no rights that are upkept for the families. These families are traumatized, dehumanized, not only in the incidents of violence, but then after those incidents as well. And I also, my last statement, to push back, I don't think you all got translation, that one of the biggest reasons for that is that we have one of the most racist and most violent police unions in the country. From supporting SB 1070 to supporting Arpaio every single election, right, to being there when the most anti-immigrant law, SB 1070, was signed.
Thank you for your testimony.
To also supporting Trump. So I just want to also make that comment. Thank you.
Xenia.
Good afternoon. My name is Xenia Orona. And I have... Can my time be started over, please?
You may have an additional 10 seconds.
Thank you very much.
Please listen to the person who has the floor.
So I did want to commend the following agenda items that are up for review and up for vote today. I think that they are excellent first steps. I also agree that the search for the software that you guys are proposing, that it should be up to the ad hoc committee, that should be open to the community and available to the people who are present in this room today. I did want to ask a couple of questions. Would the information that is being input into the accountability system, how is that put in place? Is that by the supervisors? Would it be by the employees themselves? Is there anybody available to answer at this moment?
If you could conclude your testimony, please.
Okay. My second question, I guess, would be how often are officers being evaluated psychologically, from the beat cops to sergeant and the brass? I believe that this is a very difficult job. Officers are wielding force against the community. And so they should also be regularly evaluated to see if they are eligible and in a good state of mind to be able to use the excess power that they do have. And that should also be included in the evaluation system that they have, that would be put into place. And my last question would be, would anonymized statistics or anonymized information from the results of these reviews, would they be made available to the public at any point? And would they be made available to the civilian review board that we would put in place? So those are my three questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Councilmember Garcia.
Yes, Chief Williams, City Manager, I think both questions of the psychological assessment or what kind of health assessments are made of the officers, and then the second one, which I believe was, can you repeat the last question?
So the last question is how much of the information that is gathered through the accountability system will be made available to the public and to the civilian review board for possible termination or eligibility for termination or suspension or et cetera?
So how much of the data would be available?
So Mayor, Councilmember Garcia, I think there were a couple of questions asked that our system, as we go through this ad hoc, will start breathing some breath and some life into that. There was also a question asking about regular psychological evaluations of our officers. Chief Kurtenbach and I recently, along with the Labor Association plea, went to a New York City training that talks about the critical importance of those mental health evaluations. So that is something that we can talk through and discuss through the ad hoc committee, but it's definitely something we've been discussing and having conversations about. I think you know that, I'm sorry? No, we do not. So thank you, boss. The only way that you get those mental health assessments would be if you're involved.
Chief Williams has the floor.
Thank you. So the only way that you would get those assessments is in the pre-hiring process, and or if you've been involved in a critical incident. That's one of the checklists that's required for you to come back to work.
Councilwoman Guardado.
So just on follow-up with what just being said, I'm a very hands-on person, and I would like to see, that we get like a monthly report per district, trying to figure out what are the different incidents that are happening, right? Because I would like to be a person that wants to be active in the community to trying to figure out what are the incidents that are happening. But then at the same time, as we're fixing the issues and we're, rebuilding that trust between our police department and some parts of our community, making sure that we're also celebrating that as well. So I just think having that transparency where we're actually able to see those records and we can also communicate within our districts. These are the things that are being fixed, and then these are the things, that we still need to do some work on, and making sure that, we have the community input and that we're working together with the community so we're actually rebuilding some of that trust.
Any further council member comments or questions? All right, we are ready for roll call. On 1A only. So 1A is the early intervention software system.
Who made the motion? Oh.
Okay. DeCiccio.
Yes.
Garcia.
Yes.
Guardado.
Yes.
Nowakowski.
Yes.
Pastor.
Yes.
Stark.
Yes.
Williams. Waring.
No.
Gallego.
Yes. Item passes 7-1. Thank you. We'll now move to item 1B, authorization to issue a request for qualifications to create a qualified vendor list for public opinion research firm services. We'll begin with council member questions or comments. Councilmember Garcia.